Hello and welcome to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. This week on the show, One Young World Summit. Munich platforms the leaders of the future. EU Enlargement Report, who's top of the class and who's a candidate in name only.
The coming year will be a moment of truth for all candidate countries, but especially those that presented ambitious plans to complete negotiations. High ambitions come with high expectations on reforms.
Plus, a year on from the Novi Sad disaster, where next for Serbia's protest movement? All those stories and more coming up here on Inside Europe.
Work out what you demand, work for it, make sure you achieve it, because otherwise things aren't good, guys. Good luck for the next 4 days. It's great to be here.
The ubiquitous Bob Geldof there, speaking at the opening of the One Young World Summit this week in Munich. The annual event aspires to bring together the world's brightest young leaders to tackle the most pressing issues of the day, of which, of course, there are many. Inside Europe's Laura Kabelka has been covering the event for us. So, what's her verdict?
Okay, so I have gone to quite some conferences over the years, but this one is different, and I don't say I'm inspired lightly. But here, the keynotes are really more like a TED Talk. It's very fast and engaging, and the speakers really range from football stars and actors and CEOs of like Chanel or IKEA or you name it, and politicians to activists, journalists, researchers, and there's a lot of social entrepreneurs. And this year, there are over 2,200 young leaders from really all over the world. And they make a big deal about this opening ceremony where every flag is represented by a young leader.
Russia!
And they also show the Russian flag, for example, because they say it's not about what the country's leaders stand for, but it's for the young people representing that place.
St. Kitts and Nevis!
So you have the young people, and there's also a few dozen so-called counselors who are more senior, very high level, and often quite famous personalities.
You can't just say famous personalities, name drop.
Okay, so there was the Jordanian Queen Rania giving a keynote. You had Terry Crews, who many probably know as an actor, but he also is an anti-toxic masculinity activist now. You had Nobel Peace Prize laureates like Maria Ressa, but the focus is really on the young people and their accomplishments, and they have many.
So who have you been talking to amongst this dizzying array of young stars of the future?
So I talked to a lot of the young leaders. Some were as young as 19 or 22. What they are doing actually deserves more space. You should expect some longer portraits over the next weeks, but I have compiled a few voices for you that you can hear now.
My name is Emmanuel. I am from Burkina Faso and I work in conflict resolution, peace building and prevention of youth radicalization to violent extremism.
My name is Nabal Khan. I'm a final year medical student studying in the UK. I'm also the founder of a non-for-profit Skin for All, which focuses on health equity and making sure that skin conditions are equally represented amongst white, black and brown skin.
My name is Alia Ismail. I am from Yemen. I work as the program coordinator for Women Journalists Without Chains, and I am here representing the organization because I believe that our work is very important in confronting corruption and authoritarian regimes in the Middle East and North Africa.
My name is Jakub Dietka. I'm from Poland. I'm also suffering from spinal muscular atrophy, running my own foundation, aiming for the future. I wanted to create a project that would allow persons with disabilities and especially families to have guidance through the system.
Wow, Laura, that really is an incredible sort of diversity of voices there. Were there any key topics, key themes, key threads that sort of ran through?
Yes, so this year there are 5 major themes. You have the circular economy, which is of course connected to climate change and sustainability issues. Then you have anti-hate, responsible tech, where of course AI is what everyone is talking about, generative AI. education and peace and security. So very timely issues. And one topic that also kept coming up during multiple speeches is also the topic of authoritarianism and democracy, or the erosion thereof, and how difficult it is to be optimistic right now. That's because we are here in Munich, Germany, where 100 years ago the Nazi Party was founded, and it had its strongest base here. So you know about the Munich conference. Adolf Hitler lived here for a long time. So basically, not very long ago, an international conference that is really about fostering dialogue, collaboration, international exchange. This would not have been thinkable here.
I stand here in Munich, conscious of the history that radiates through the city and this country.
So a lot of speakers did mention that, showing how change is possible, but it can go either way. This, for example, is what Queen Rania Al Abdullah of Jordan said.
History reminds us of the cost of silence, because hate cannot make headway without the support of its silent ally and enabler, indifference.
I've got a sort of a sense for the sheer scale of this, the voices that have been gathered together in one place with the backing of really some heavyweight names. This is all going to be quite pricey. How is the summit funded?
Yes, that's what I was wondering too. So I sat down with the two founders of One Young World, Kate Robertson and David Jones. They say they want to include leaders from all sectors, but the corporate sector is very much represented here. They sponsor most delegates, so the young people to come here. There's loads of business representatives speaking at the conference. So David Jones put it like this.
The world of NGOs, they have amazing intentions and a lot of incredible people, but they don't have the same kind of ability to drive impact. They don't have the same kind of funding and resource as the world of business, and they don't necessarily have the same expertise in execution. So rather than sort of say, oh no, we don't want those evil people at our conference, they're like, if we actually bring them on board in the journey, we're going to be able to get a lot more done. And of course, there are certain sectors we're not going to have as partners.
Okay, Laura, so I think I'm hearing from you that there is this aspiration to be above politics. This is about people and it's about ideas. Doesn't matter where they come from, doesn't matter who they're backed by. Is that sort of fair?
Well, so I talked about that with them because it's not only about the corporate sector, but it's also about the political leaders that they invite. And although it seems quite broad ranged, they do draw some lines. I asked them whether they would, for example, invite Donald Trump. And that led to the following exchange between the two founders.
My view is no. Kate might have a different view, but it's not about politics, to be clear. It's just about ethics.
And if we felt,
if
we felt from the community that they wanted that, I think I would probably retire immediately and go and hide under a rock.
No, but I think
it's the right question.
The senior leaders we put on stage at One Young World are, for us, the world's moral leaders. And if you're not one of the world's moral leaders, we don't think it's a great idea bringing you here.
You know, it would be easy to go after that sort of stuff for the sake of headlines. That's a dangerous game.
That's really interesting, Laura, because that seems to be very much a moral framing rather than a political one.
Yes, and they make a big point of this, like morality, but also empathy, whereas other leaders, like Elon Musk, if you want to call him a leader, say empathy is a weakness. They really focus on that and saying this will help us drive social change. And impact is also a word that they were using a lot. According to their apparently very conservative numbers in the way that they measure impact, these young leaders have impacted a total of around 60 million people around the world.
And we'll be hearing concrete examples in the pieces that I know we have to look forward to from you. Laura, I just wanted to end, really by giving the voice to one of the youth ambassadors. Is there someone who's really stuck out for you?
Yes, it's hard to choose, but I spoke to a young Greek social entrepreneur called Lefteris Arapakis, and his mission is to clean the Mediterranean Sea.
Like when I started, my whole project, I was like 21, 22 years old. People don't take you seriously. Like when you are 24 and you're talking to a CEO of a multinational company, you're younger than the interns they have over there. But age does not mean that you don't know what you're talking about. You can drive a change. You can, make a real impact.
Lefteris Arapakis there. Thank you so much, Laura. Enjoy the rest of the summit in Munich, and I will look forward to hearing all your stories when you get back.
Thank you.
Only if we complete the unification of Europe can we ensure peace, freedom and prosperity on our continent, meaning fulfilling or working based on the reasons why our European Union has been established. Only together with all those who share our values, ensure Europe has an independent voice in the world.
The voice of EU Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kors there, speaking this week at the release of the EU's annual Enlargement Report. Watching it all was DW Europe's new Brussels correspondent, Ferenc Gál. I put it to him that the Enlargement Report is a bit like a school scorecard, with the 10 countries aspiring to EU membership being marked according to how well they've performed in the various challenges assigned them. Rule of law enforcement, corruption clean-ups, press freedom improvements, etc.
Yes, that's a good comparison because there's very clear differences in how the EU has evaluated the progress that different countries has made. Montenegro and Albania are clearly the ones where the European Commission thinks they are on the best track to meet their objective of joining the EU. Especially Montenegro has been widely seen as the front runner. Even European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, when she visited Montenegro just last October, called the country a front runner, and the Commission yesterday said that they see them on a good track to, by 2027, conclude the process of necessary reforms.
And then, of course, we have Ukraine, the most hotly watched there. Ukraine set itself an ambitious target of becoming a full member by 2028. But obviously the challenges of doing that whilst at war are not inconsiderable. And there were words of warning amidst praise for Ukraine, right? Could you perhaps tell me a bit more about where the EU Commission sees Ukraine at the moment in its trajectory towards membership?
Yes, so the European Commission has said in its report that it sees Ukraine as continuing to be strongly committed to accessing the EU and has set 2030 sort of as a realistic deadline for that. But it has also, as you have just pointed out, pointed towards issues, especially in the field of anti-corruption, that really need to be addressed. So as a reminder, maybe just this summer, there was huge international and also domestic outcry in Ukraine when the president took steps that really weakened two key anti-corruption agencies. He then reversed after a lot of criticism. So cases like this one really illustrate that the EU still sees the need for a lot of anti-corruption reform in Ukraine, but is also hopeful and at least in its external communication confident that Ukraine is on the track to address these issues.
Okay, so on track, but with challenges to overcome in terms of the process of fulfilling criteria. But there is, of course, another challenge that Ukraine is facing, and that is that it just takes one country, right, to be able to block the accession of another country to full membership. And at the moment, that country is Hungary.
Exactly. So in the process of a new member state's accession to the EU, the agreement of all 27 member countries is needed at every step of the way, basically. And Hungary has been a very vocal opponent of Ukraine accessing the EU and has just blocked formal progress on Ukraine's accession so far, something that also Ukrainian President Zelensky addressed yesterday in a speech at an event here in Brussels where he joined remotely and called on Hungary to at least, if not actively support Ukraine, then to at least let the process move forward.
Let's talk now about the bottom of the class, as it were. Georgia, it's now a candidate country in name only, according to the Commission.
Yeah, exactly. So Enlargement Commissioner Marta Kors was really very clear when she talked about the lack of progress and the very concerning developments from the European Commission's perspective, especially since the last elections in autumn 2024. The EU has repeatedly voiced concern over the democratic backsliding in Georgia, and yesterday Commissioner Kos called on the government to change course and to stop cracking down on civil society, to stop jailing opposition activists and pro-European Georgians. So it's very clear that the European Union does not see a realistic chance of Georgia joining anytime soon if this trend is not reversed.
Ferenc Sgal covers EU affairs for DW's Europe department. Georgia, by the way, may be a candidate country in name only now, but as those EU flags waved during protests on the streets of Tbilisi keep reminding us, that name is still very important to a lot of Georgians right now. We'll be hearing more from the other country singled out for particular criticism by the report next. No surprises here. We're off to Serbia in just a minute. It's been a week of rebuke for Serbia. The EU's Enlargement Commissioner has told the country that it has to decide between Europe and Russia, criticising its failure to align its foreign policy with the Eurobloc, as well as a sharp slowdown in domestic reforms. Meanwhile, Sweden has announced that it is withdrawing most of its foreign aid to Serbia over corruption concerns. This comes as the country marks the one-year anniversary of the Novi Sad Railway Station disaster, when a concrete canopy collapsed on the heads of people below. 16 people died, triggering a series of anti-corruption protests that is still going strong. Our Balkans correspondent Guy Delorne was one of over 100,000 people who flocked to Novi Sad last weekend as they marked the one-year anniversary of the disaster.
It's the day before the commemoration of the Novi Sad Railway Station disaster, and it seems like half the city has turned out to welcome people from across Serbia who are coming to pay their respects. This crossroads in the centre is absolutely packed, and it's a party atmosphere. Whole families have come along to cheer the arrivals who are coming in by foot and by bike. There are flares and fireworks to light the way, and a soundtrack of horns, whistles and drums. Everything is kept in order by rows of student marshals in high-vis vests.
I always wanted to live and stay here, and when everything started, there's like hundreds of thousands of young people who want to stay here, and they want to fight for the country.
Alexa is a student of management at Novi Sad University. He helped to coordinate the commemoration.
Why we're different is because people believe in us, people believe in that there are some young people that actually want to make this country a livable place for, it's actually a lot of people say that it's not just for us, it's for our kids, and we are kids actually right now. We don't plan children for the next 5 to 10 years. We have to live here, we have to find jobs and everything.
Students across the country have maintained the protests for a full 12 months. They've occupied their campuses, staged regular rallies, and brought hundreds of thousands of people to set-piece events in the capital, Belgrade. Initially, they were demanding full accountability and transparency for the railway station disaster. Now they're simply calling for fresh elections, which they say will bring meaningful change to the country. But what makes the student protests really stand out is their resilience.
We were also genuinely surprised by the intensity of the movement, both in length and frequency.
Magda Anastasievich is the Eastern European Research Manager for the US-based conflict monitor, ACLED.
We also have a new actor who emerged, which is students who have not been very active in the past few years. And this is also, I think, somewhat of a global trend of people complaining about sort of Gen Z being passive and docile and so on. However, students mobilized in this. The government reactions to this protest also galvanized and sustained the movement, attacking the protesters either through police or through violent mobs of the ruling Serbian Progressive Party supporters, which would again mobilize people to come out again and go back on the streets.
Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić has struggled to find a strategy to quell the protests. Over the past year, he's attempted concessions, like dispensing with his Prime Minister. There's also been fiery rhetoric, accusing the students of taking funding and direction from unnamed foreign powers who supposedly want to foment a so-called colour revolution. But ahead of the commemoration, he took a different tack. He apologised for his behaviour and called for reconciliation.
Nigde nas neće dovesti to što krivimo jedni druge.
Blaming each other will get us nowhere. Only by working together can we create something better. True justice must be served for the lives lost on that fateful day. We all agree on that, but not justice invented on the streets, justice that is brought about in institutions. Some of us may think that these institutions are not capable, but these are the only institutions we have, and we have to support them and appeal to them to do their job.
That didn't convince the students. They want elections, not talks. But still, Saturday's commemoration was a solemn but peaceful affair. But it seems like tensions are rising again in Serbia's capital, Belgrade. This week, there have been disturbances in front of the National Assembly, where the mother of one of the victims of the railway station disaster is staging a hunger strike, demanding justice. On Wednesday, the governing Progressive Party bussed in thousands of supporters. Some of them mocked Diana Hrka, whose son Stefan died in Novi Sad. She blames corruption for the canopy collapse and insists that Serbia has to change what she calls its rotten system.
I am only interested in justice. I want to know who killed my child. No one can bring me back his 27 years. No one can bring me back one of his calls or messages. When he says to me, Mom, which is priceless. That's why I'll be after them as long as I live. As long as I stand on my feet, I won't give them peace. They will be held accountable for this, because this is a crime.
And that sums up the past week. Emotion and drama, but little sign of any resolution, 1 year on from the disaster in Novi Sad. For Serbia, there could yet be a winter with unusually high temperatures. Guy Delaunay, DW, Novi Sad.
A quick reminder of our feedback address, insideeurope@dw.com. Next week, we will be focusing on environmental stories around the COP, so if you have any suggestions or questions, then do drop us a line. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe.
When headlines get louder, we go deeper.
Say hello to Berlin Briefing,
your guide to Germany's impact on the world.
Between East and West, autocrats and democrats, Germany's whole system is under stress.
Politics, power plays,
pressure from all sides.
And the world around Germany is getting more dangerous.
Is democracy glitching? Too much noise, too little clarity.
We decode what it means for you.
From Berlin to right where you are.
It's all in Berlin Briefing on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Inside Europe, the weekly current affairs podcast and radio programme from DW, Germany's international broadcaster. I'm Kate Laycock in Bonn. Still to come, a bridge too far, why even a court decision looks unlikely to stop Italy's most controversial construction project.
That someone is ordering me to leave this place after 54 years. I don't like that one bit, she says.
Spanish paternity leave. Spanish fathers lead the way in the European parenting equality stakes.
Before the child was born, he started to read a lot about babies, about the things that, for example, I didn't do it.
Plus, sound and silence with Arvo Pärt, a celebration of the Estonian composer at 90. As we were going to studio last week, Italy's infrastructure minister, Matteo Salvini, was emerging defiantly from an emergency government meeting to announce his determination that the Messina Bridge will be built, despite the Italian Court of Auditors' refusal to authorise the multi-billion-dollar plan to connect Sicily to the mainland. The Italian government, Salvini believes, will be able to answer the court's concerns point by point. Our correspondent, Angelo van Schaik, has been looking into Italy's most controversial construction project and the political stakes surrounding it.
Fiorella. Fiorella is 85 years old and lives in the hills above the city of Messina. She owns a beautiful villa with a great view of the Strait of Messina. Calabria, the Italian mainland, is so close it feels like you could touch it. Signora Fiorella. She's been living here for more than 50 years. That someone is ordering me to leave this place after 54 years, I don't like that one bit, she says. Fiorella lives in one of the roughly 300 houses in Sicily that are set to be demolished to make way for the construction of the bridge over the Strait of Messina. In the place where her house now stands, a viaduct will be built to connect the bridge to the existing highway. And a bit further downhill, she lives at an elevation of about 300 meters, one of the bridge's pillars will be erected. Driving around his own neighborhood, Daniele Ialacqua from the No Ponte, so the No Bridge movement, shows the impact the bridge will have on the city. The houses in front of me, he says, all villas of around 200 square meters with a garden, have to be demolished. Just like this beautiful Liberty Villa from the early 20th century. There, a pillar will be built, one of the two that's going to support the bridge. With a circumference of about 50 meters and almost 400 meters high. In comparison, the Eiffel Tower in Paris is 300 meters in height. The bridge, with a capital B, has been a subject of debate for decades. Italy's Minister of Infrastructure, Matteo Salvini, is now pushing to move forward with its construction. But there are serious doubts about the technical feasibility of the project.
Sulla base di quello che ho detto fino adesso e da quello che sostengo con I materiali attuali.
With today's materials you can build a bridge, but there is no safety guarantee, says Antonio Risitano, engineer and former professor at the Polytechnic University of Turin. The bridge might stand, but it won't be reliable. From the very first moment until the end of its 200-year lifespan, the bridge should be equally safe. But with the materials currently available, steel and concrete, that level of safety cannot be guaranteed. The main argument in favour of the bridge is that a faster connection to the mainland would benefit the Sicilian economy. But given the shift from road to sea transport for goods, even that claim is questionable, says Guido Signorino, economics lecturer at the University of Messina. The big question then is, why does this bridge really need to be built?
Quello che è evidente è che ogni volta che il progetto è stato...
It seems that there are major economic interests behind the scenes, pushing for the construction of the bridge, says the professor, or at the very least, for reviving the project whenever the opportunity arises. That's what happens time and again. Despite the shaky technical and economic foundations of the bridge, there are apparently companies pressuring politicians, particularly those on the right, to see the project through. Reportedly, the construction companies stand to receive hefty compensation, running into the hundreds of millions, even if the project is never completed. Meanwhile, the threat of expropriation continues to loom over the residents. If you have to leave, where are you going? I wouldn't know where to go outside of this corner of paradise, she says. Last week's decision by the Italian Court of Auditors has granted the residents a reprieve. But it is likely to only be brief. Italy's infrastructure minister Matteo Salvini has all but staked his political career on the project, and he is determined to appeal. Emerging from an emergency government meeting last Thursday, Salvini declared his confidence that work would begin again in February, once the court's concerns had been answered point by point. The message was clear. Despite legal setbacks, protests, the doubts of engineers and the devastation of a unique natural environment, this bridge is going to be built, one way or another. Angelo van Schaik, DW, Messina, Italy.
I guess you could say that Italy's leaders are hoping it all turns out to be water under the bridge. This week, if you head on over to Spotify, we are giving you the chance to vote for your favourite European bridges. The choices are Tower Bridge, London, Ponte Vecchio, Florence, Le Pont d'Avignon, Avignon, Öresund, that's the one connecting Denmark and Sweden, or you could, of course, use the comment function to suggest your own. Just head on over to Spotify to take part. So this is not part of the quiz, but here is a question for you. Which European country do you think is leading the pack in terms of paternity leave right now? Now, the chances are that the possibilities that have just come into your head are all Northern European, Scandinavian perhaps. You'd actually be wrong. The answer is Spain. A recent report by the Institute of Fiscal Studies and the National University of Distance Education showed that in 2023, 42% of parental leave users in Spain were men. Sweden and Norway only registered 28%. In France, it was 11%, and Germany a mere 7%. That one, I have to say, does not surprise me. So, what is Spain doing differently? Here's Ashish Sharma with one daddy of a report.
A stone's throw away from Plaza Mayor at the very heart of Madrid, the Platform for Parental Equality, the PPIINA, is holding a 20th anniversary meeting. The organisation has long championed that men can also be sole caregivers, and that giving both genders equal time off reduces discrimination against women in the workplace.
My name is Mariano Nieto Navarro. I'm part of this Spanish platform for equal paternity-maternity leaves. For fathers, the advantages are to change the traditional role, which has usually been an absent father. Not being absent means creating emotional link with your child and learning a lot of new skills for children also. Having not only the mother but also the father psychologically, that's a very strong foundation for the development, the personality.
Laureano Martinez, a university lecturer at the Complutense University here in Madrid, took advantage of 16 weeks leave at full play when his son Vincent was born a few years ago. That leave has now been extended to 19 weeks.
We are both from Argentina, so we don't have family here to help us with the kids. At the beginning, the first 6 weeks we spent together, and then I took 10 and she started working, and then she took 10 and I started working.
Did you feel, if I take 16 weeks out, I'm going to kind of fall behind in my career?
Yeah, it affects your career. My wife, she's also an academic, so we are in the same situation. For instance, 2 years after Valentine's Beard, we didn't publish anything, and we know publishing is really important in academics.
How much do you feel you've changed as a person?
You really value the act of taking care of someone else. That changed your mind because it can be difficult, it can be demanding, but when you live that changed your viewpoint. I feel I'm more sensitive with social issues in general.
Laureano is one of very few men who was able to stagger his time off and separate it from his wife's leave. In general, though, requesting paternity leave at different times is harder, which leads to men opting to take all the weeks off at one go. According to Mariano, this is due to red tape, which ends up reinforcing the role of the father as a support figure, as opposed to being a main carer.
Men are coined in the traditional role of being a helping hand. We believe that the main factor is a design of the legislation and the administrative burdens in order for the fathers to fraction their leave. The lower the income, the more difficult to fraction, to divide your leave. When there's a higher income, there's a higher negotiation with your employer.
More comfortable if I sit down.
Oh, yeah, sure. But there are reasons not related to bureaucracy which leads to men taking all their time off alongside their wives. Cristina Alvarez became a mother just 5 months ago for the first time. She says she wanted her husband to take his time off with her.
The main reason was that I was afraid of being alone with the child. It's our first child. Before the child was born, he started to read a lot about babies, about the things that, for example, I didn't do it.
And in terms of his job, how did the situation change for him?
He works in an insurance company and his department is IT, and he didn't have any problem to ask for the leave. But he will return, and he told me, no, I think now I have my priority. And when I need to go to pick up the baby to the kindergarten, I will go and I will stop the meeting. I won't care. The company will understand, we hope.
Cristina has returned to work and admits she's struggled to readjust. But she also says there are more important reasons than just professional ones for men having equal leave time.
It's not only about the professional career, but about your mental health. And your mental health affects all your life. So some of my colleagues or my friends that, for example, they couldn't benefit from these 16 weeks for the father, they suffer a lot. I mean, they didn't enjoy the months as, for example, as I have done, as we have done.
While there are reasons to celebrate the equality in parental leave in Spain, there is a clear next step that is now in focus. The legislation is too bureaucratic. Staggering leave means applying each time to Social Security, as well as liaising with employers, who find it easier if all the time is taken at once. But with the harder part of 19 weeks equal leave at full pay being achieved, tinkering with the edges should be, well, child's play. Ashish Sharma, DW, Madrid.
How does your country's paternity leave compare to Spain? I'd be genuinely curious to hear. Inside Europe at dw.com if you want to drop us a line. I'm Kate Laycock in Germany. You're listening to Inside Europe. Arvo Pärt is the most widely performed living composer in the world, yet his music grew out of silence, censorship, and spiritual resistance under Soviet rule. As a young man in Estonia, he experimented with serialism and modernist idioms, only to have his works suppressed by the authorities. His credo, a bold setting of "I believe in Jesus Christ," was banned, marking him as a dangerous outsider. For nearly a decade, he fell silent, withdrawing in both protest and necessity. Pärt and his family were eventually forced into exile, settling first in Vienna and later in Berlin. To mark the composer's 90th birthday year, Brendan O'Shea spoke with Estonian conductor Paavo Järvi, who grew up with Pärt, literally at the family table. Through his memories, we glimpse not only the composer, but the Estonia that shaped him.
In Soviet-occupied Estonia, music was a form of quiet resistance. Paavo Järvi was part of one of the country's most celebrated musical families. His father, the world-renowned conductor Neeme, championed Estonian composers at a time when Russian culture was imposed from above. Arvo Pärt was one of many composers who passed through their family home. The cellist Rostropovich and the legendary violinist David Oistrakh were also there. Yet, as Paavo recalls, Pärt stood out, not just for his music, but for his presence.
My father was a conductor in Estonia and studied in Leningrad Conservatory. And when he came back, he was a music director of the opera and also the symphony orchestra and also the chamber orchestra, so that he really was in the center of the musical life in Estonia. And he was promoting Estonian composers. Arvo Pärt was one of the ones who stood out because he looked different, and he was a little bit like a interesting mix between a kind of a hippie with a long hair and long beard, and he had this sort of a jean jacket and jeans and t-shirt and a baseball cap, and he was a little bit different. He was a very close friend of my father's. He was a very warm, incredibly warm and wonderful person with a very warm sense of humor.
Today, the nonagenarian Pärt is more than a composer in Estonia. He is a symbol. Exile and repression shaped not only his music, but also his artistic identity. His works, born of silence, patience, and inner conviction, became a subtle form of resistance, and he emerged as a figure of artistic freedom.
He's like a national treasure. He's regarded as a kind of a symbol of Estonia, and clearly he is the most recognized and the most well-known Estonian in the world. And, it's a paradox, because how many countries can you name where the most famous person in the country is a classical composer? There is no other country like that. And for us, of course, being a very small country, that's incredibly important, because it puts the right image forward. It shows the country as a cultured, enlightened place.
At first glance, Pärt's music seems disarmingly simple. Few notes, slow pace, long silences. Yet beneath it lies extraordinary complexity and a history of survival.
The paradox is that we are conditioned to think that if music is fast and there's a lot of notes and a lot of complicated rhythms, then it's difficult. Actually, the faster the music is, the more intense and complicated and rhythmically complex things are, the easier they are to play, because all you have to do is figure out how to play those rhythms, which one can do. If you have very few notes and they move incredibly slowly, and each note needs to be presented in the right context and connected somehow to what came before, or the silence that came before, that's already a language that is very hard to do well, because it can become just a series of disjointed notes which will not make a piece, or it doesn't become a piece, and it will require a certain common understanding or belief in how this music should be played, and understanding of the whole choral culture and breathing and the importance of silence, and how one note can have so many different colors, and you have nowhere to hide. There is nothing other than this one note. But there is nothing simple about Arvo Pärt's music, and it's very hard to do well.
Over the decades, Pärt has continually reinvented himself. Each transformation was not only musical, but also a statement of survival. The harsh dissonance of his early works reflected both modernist experiment and defiance. The retreat into sacred stillness became a subtle form of resistance under a regime that forbade open religious expression. His tintinnabuli style, born out of silence, was as much a spiritual discovery as a quiet political act.
Well, as a symphony orchestra conductor, I always have been drawn to the earlier period of Arvo Pärt, because he wrote for the orchestra at that time. The first piece he wrote for the orchestra was Opus 5, I think, called Necrologue. You know, imagine a young composer writing a first piece and naming it Necrologue, you know, which is clearly a social commentary. It's a very dissonant piece in the Soviet Union. And then the first three symphonies, fantastic symphonies, and there are many other. Second part of this tintinnabuli style, which came after 8 or 9 years of this, what he calls a creative silence, is something that is written often for string orchestras, choruses, smaller orchestras. Some of it use winds, so it is a little bit sparse orchestration, and it is the style that made him very famous. And that's the period that he became, known as Arvo Pärt, the new voice in new music. And then the third period, which he hasn't really defined, but I call it kind of the new romantic period, or the romantic Arvo Pärt, which is the last period where he writes the Silhouette and Swan Song.
From the radical protests of Credo to the hypnotic clarity of Fratres. To the luminous colours of his later music, Pärt sought truth in sound. For conductor Pavel Järvi, Pärt's music has transcended politics and trends. Yet, even in that transcendence, the memory of exile and censorship is never far away. To many listeners, his music still carries the quiet defiance of one who believed in truth, even when truth was forbidden.
I think right now Arvo Pärt's music has transcended all of this. In fact, his whole philosophy now is that there is so much noise and there is so much fakery, and that basically dominates. It dominates everything we do. And his answer to this, as opposed to the earlier Pärt that kind of wrote against it, he withdraws and he writes something beautiful. He only deals in real values, so to speak, that somehow becomes very meaningful now, because all we hear is noise. We almost never hear anything insightful anymore. It's all about sound bites and noise. That's why he went inside himself and looked for that quiet place where he can speak quietly and tell the truth.
Pavel Järvi reminds us that there is nothing simple about Arvo Pärt. His music is difficult, fragile, deeply demanding, yet it continues to speak across borders and generations. For Estonia and for listeners everywhere, Pärt has become more than a composer. He is a voice of truth in sound. For DW, this is Brendan O'Shea in Berlin.
And that is it for today. This programme was produced by me, Kate Laycock, with help from Laura Kabelka. Our sound engineer was Ziad Abu Sleiman, assisted by Ilias Katsamakis and Navina Boot. Inside Europe comes to you from DW in Bonn.